All right, guys. Today we're going to get started with Act 2, Scene 1 of Shakespeare's tragedy of Julius Caesar. We have me, obviously I'm here. I've got my mug that says I'm a star baker. And we've also got Miss Maggie Moo here in the background. But she's a wild thing, so she's just hanging out. She's moping with her drumsticks. If you want to follow along with the question packet, you are welcome to do that here. It is located under your classwork tab here in Google Classroom. I will also be making just a really short tutorial style video for working on your phone, because some of you are going to be limited to only working on your phones at certain times. So don't be afraid to do that as well. I just want to make sure we go over kind of some of the finer points, because I've had multiple kids in the past use their phones and then they're like, my work didn't save. And so we're going to go over that, but that'll be a separate video. So if you want to open up the text as well, that'll be located around your question set. You'll want to open up Act 2 here. So you can have this opened, and you can also have the questions opened as well. Yours is going to be under view assignment, but that is totally fine with me. Alrighty, the next thing that you're going to want to what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be reading together. I am anticipating getting through all of Act 2, or for the first scene of Act 2, about halfway through today. I have a mark on here, but I am looking to keep the videos to about 20 minutes, since those are pretty digestible in terms of what we can accomplish on any given day. I have made notes next to my reading that show you kind of where questions might be. All right, so let me pull up my timer, and I'll set a timer for 20 minutes just for my reference, and then we're going to get started. All right, so the first scene in Act 2 actually starts off with Brutus alone. Brutus is talking to himself, and he's here and he's talking to his servant Lucius. He says, "What, Lucius, ho, I cannot by the progress of the stars give guess to how near today. Lucius, I say, I would it were my fault to sleep so soundly when awake, I say, what Lucius?" He is just calling for his servant to wake up, as we all do. You know, we all have servants that we can wake up in the middle of the night to light candles for us in our studies. And then the next thing that happens is Lucius does wake up and comes into the space. And then Lucius is like, "What do you want? Called you, my lord?" And Brutus is like, "Well, get me a taper in my study. When it is lighted, come here and call me." So he's like, "Lucius, I need you to talk to me." Let's move this guy out of the way. He's like, "I need you to let me know when my candle is lit." And Lucius is like, "Sure, whatever, dude." So he says, "Get me my taper in my study." Taper in this instance does just mean candle. All right, because they are tapered. And then Lucius is like, "Sure, whatever, dude. I will, my lord." And then he leaves. All right, so Brutus is going to talk to himself a little bit here. He says, "It must be by his death, and for my part, I know no personal cause to spurn at him, but for the general, he would be crowned. How that might change his nature, there's the question. It is a bright day that brings forth the adder, and that craves wary walking. Crown him that night will grant we put a sting in him, that at his will we may do danger with the abuse of greatness that it disjoins." Brutus is worried, like many of us might be, that his friend might become a little power hungry if he's promoted. Have you ever worked at like a fast food restaurant and your friend who works there with you gets promoted over you, and then all of a sudden they're on a little bit of a power trip? That's what Brutus is saying here. He says, I have no personal cause to spurn at him, but for the general, he would be crowned. How might that change his nature? There's the question. He's like, this could totally change who Caesar is and who I know him to be. And that makes him very nervous, that at his will, he may do danger. Okay. So he's very anxious about Caesar abusing his power here. All right. And then he says, "Remorse from power, and to speak truth of Caesar, I have not known when his affection swayed more than his reason." All right. So he's like, I don't consider Caesar to be an emotional person. All right. But when we are placed in unique positions of power, that can change. "But 'tis a common proof that lowliness is young ambition's ladder, whereto the climber upward turns his face. But when he once attains the utmost round, he then look into his ladder turns his back, looks in the clouds, scorning the base degrees by which he did ascend. So Caesar may. Then lest he may prevent, and since the quarrel will bear no color for the thing he is, fashion it thus, and that what he is, augmented, would run these things in these extremities, and therefore think of him as a serpent's egg, which hatched would as his kind grow mischievous and kill him in the shell. All right, so he's like, I know Caesar is not an emotional person as shown up here, but he's like, ambition and power can really play kind of a detrimental part here. And so he's like, I understand that maybe he isn't a problem now, but he could be a problem later. All right, so Lucius comes back in, and Lucius finds the letter. Now remember, at the end of the last act, Cassius is all like, we need to get Brutus on our side. I'm gonna write a bunch of letters and throw them in his window, because that's how we accomplished things back in ancient Rome. And so Lucius, of course, finds one as he goes to light his candle, and he brings it to Brutus, and he says, the taper burneth in your closet, so I've lit the candle in your closet, sir. Searching the window for a flint, I found this paper. Okay, thus sealed, and I am sure it did not lie there when I went to bed. And so he's like, well, I want you to know this is new. I didn't put this there. Well, and then Brutus is like, you can go back to bed. And he's like, is not tomorrow the Ides of March? And Lucius is like, I don't know, I know not, sir. And Brutus says, look in the calendar and bring me word. And Lucius says he will, and he leaves. And then at line 45, Brutus speaks again. He says, the exaltations whizzing in the air give so much light that I may read by them. So he's saying that the stars and the moon are so bright here that he doesn't even need a candle to read. All right, and I'll make a note of that here. All right. And then the next thing he says is, he is actually reading the letter. It says, Brutus, thou sleepest, awake and see thyself. Shall Rome, etc., speak, strike, redress. Now, the language here is really interesting, so I'm actually going to come in here a little closer. Okay. So Brutus says here, he says, Brutus, thou sleepest, awake and see thyself. This is that kind of idea that comes from the first time Cassius says, like, can you see yourself, Brutus? And Brutus is all like, no. And Cassius is all like, well, I wish you could see yourself so that you could see how much Rome loves you. And so Cassius actually echoes that here in what he says to Brutus in this letter. He says, shall Rome, etc. And then he says, speak, strike, redress. Okay, so he says, like, speak, so state what you want to say, strike, act, say, strike. Now, redress is a new word for us. It's not one we've come across before. And redress means to remedy. All right, so he says, Brutus needs to help remedy this current situation that we are in. All right, and so Brutus starts kind of picking this letter apart as well. He says, Brutus, thou sleepest awake. Such instigations have often been dropped when I have looked them up. So he's like, I've heard that before, I need to wake up. I need to see Rome for what it really is. Maggie, stop. Sorry, Maggie's her skin itches today. And then my ancestors did from the streets of Rome the Tarquin drive when he was called a king. Speak, strike, regress. Am I entreated? Am I asked to speak and strike? O Rome, I make thee a promise. If the remedy follow, so if the redress follow, thou perceivest thou hast full petition at the hand of Brutus. He's like, if you want me to act, that's fine, because I want to fix whatever problem you perceive to be wrong with Rome. That's one of the biggest things you kind of need to take away from Brutus here is Brutus loves Rome. He loves Rome more than anything else, probably even more than his own wife. And so he will always do what he thinks is the right thing for the best of Rome. All right, so Lucius comes back in. He lets us know that it is, in fact, the Ides of March. And then the next thing that happens is Brutus hears a knock. So Brutus, hey, stop. Okay. So Brutus is like, cool. Go to the gate. Somebody knocks. Since Cassius first did wet me against Caesar, I have not slept. Between the acting of the dreadful thing and the first motion, all the interim, like a phantasmal or hideous dream, the genius and the mortal instruments are in the council and the state of man. Like a little kingdom suffers then the night of an insurrection. All right. So once again, Brutus lets us know here that he hasn't been sleeping well, that ever since Cassius has kind of put out that Brutus doesn't, or that Caesar doesn't deserve to be king. He's like, I haven't slept since Cassius introduced this thought in my head. I'm really uncomfortable with it all. And so he's like, my brain has been filled with phantasma and hideous dreams. And so he's like, this has really been a problem for me. Once again, Brutus here is plagued by conflict. He's plagued by conflict when we first meet him, when he talks to Cassius at the beginning of the play, and he's plagued now. He's constantly at battle with himself. The next thing that Lucia says is, "Sir, 'tis your brother Cassius at the door, who doth desire to see you." He's like, Cassius is here, as one does. All right, and then Brutus says, "Is he alone?" And then Lucius says, "No, sir, there are more with him." So Cassius has brought people with him this time to try and get them on their side. All right. And then Brutus is like, "Well, do you know who they are?" And Lucius is like, "No, sir, their hats are plucked about their ears, and half their faces are buried in their cloaks, that by no means I may discover them by any mark of favor." All right. They're hiding who they are here because they don't want to be kind of placed in connection with this conspiracy. They don't want anything coming back to them. So Brutus says, "Let them enter." Lucius exits. "They are a faction, O conspiracy. Shamest thou to think thy dangerous brow by night, when evils are most free? Oh, then by day there wilt thou find a cavern dark enough to mask thy monstrous visage." Right? And so visage means face. All right? "Seek none, conspiracy, hide it in smiles and affability. For if thou pass thy native semblance on, nor Erebus itself are dim enough to hide thee prevention." All right? So he's like, they're here to kind of get me on their side. He's like, I'm not sure if I'm on their side. This seems a bit monstrous. And so he's like, I'm still not sure if this is kind of the path I want to be on when it comes to how we're dealing with Caesar. He's like, I don't agree with Caesar being king. I'm nervous that he'll become rich with power. He will become too ambitious. But ultimately that, he doesn't necessarily know if he wants to go the path that the others are. All right, so we enter the conspirators: Cassius, Casca, Decius, Cinna, Metellus, and Trebonius. Great names. I hope you all name your firstborn these. And Cassius says, "I think we are too bold upon your rest. Good morrow, Brutus. Do we trouble you?" So this is just like typical greeting stuff. So he's all like, "Hey, dude, like, how are you? Is this a problem?" And Brutus is like, "I was up already, so don't sweat it. Know these men that come along with you." And Cassius is like, "Yes, every single one of them." And he says, "Yes, every man of them, and no man here but honors you." So he's like, all the dudes here are like your friends, and everyone doth wish that you had but the opinion of yourself that every noble Roman bears of you. All right. And so I have a note here off to the side. It says, "We wish you could see how awesome you are." And that's true. He's like, once again, Cassius is driving this forward, this idea of, you don't understand how great you are. If you would just let me show you, you would understand that maybe you should be king over Caesar. So he then introduces each one. He's like, "This is Trebonius," and Brutus is all like, "Welcome," and this is Decius, and he's like, "That's awesome," and he's like, "This is Casca, Cinna, Metellus, Simmer," and Brutus is like, "They're all welcome. What careful cares do you interpose themselves betwixt your eyes and night? Shall I entreat a word?" And Decius is like, "Here lies the east. Doth not the day break here?" And Casca says, "No." So they're asking if it's almost daylight. It's not. Cinna says, "Oh, pardon, sir, it doth. And the yon gray lines that fret the clouds are messengers of the day." He's like, it's almost daylight. It's going to be heading that way anyway. And Casca says, "You shall confess that you are both deceived. Here, as I point my sword, the sun arises, which is great way of growing in the south, weighing the youthful season of the year. Some 2 months hence, up higher toward the north, he first presents his fire, and the high east stands as the capital directly here." So they're fighting over whether or not the sun is rising here. It's rising. There's like back and forth. Basically, it's trying to show this. Some of them think they have more time. Some of them think they have less time. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. it's just a weird conversation. And then Brutus says, coming forward, Cassius, give me all of your hands one by one. So he wants to shake each of their hands, something that would probably not be appropriate right now. And then Cassius says, and let us swear our resolution. Okay, so Cassius is like, yes, let's shake hands and like, agree that we're going to kill this guy. And Brutus is like, no, not an oath. If not the face of men, the sufferance of souls, the times of use, if these motives weak, break off betimes, and every man hence to his idle beds, so let high-sided tyranny range on, till each man drop by lottery. But if these, as I am sure do, bear fire enough to kindle cowards and steal with valor, the melting spirits of women, then, countrymen, what need we to spur any but our own cause to prick us to remedy or redress? What other bond than secret Romans that have spoke the word and will not palter? And what other oath than honesty to honesty engage? Brutus is totally calling these guys out here. He's like, I don't know why we need to like have an oath. He's like, because ultimately, like, if what we're doing is the right thing, then it's the right thing. We shouldn't have to like swear allegiance or oaths or anything like that. I love it because this is one of the few times we see Brutus really stand up to them. Swear priests and cowards and men cautelous, old feeble carrions, such suffering souls, that something wrongs unto bad causes swear, such creatures as men doubt, but do not strain the even virtue of our enterprise, nor the insuppressive metal of our spirits. He's saying here, he's like, only priests and cowards and cautelous men and weak men and suffering men swear oaths. And we are none of those things. So we are going to like commit to this. And he says, it is guilty of several bastardy if he could do break the smallest particle of any promise that had passed from him. And like one of the guys, Cassius, is like, okay, I'm not going to acknowledge that. He says, but what of Cicero? Shall we sound for him? I think he will stand very strong with us. So Cassius is like, we need one more guy on our side. This guy needs to be Cicero. And Cassius is like, let us not leave him out. So we should definitely include him. And Cinna agrees, like, no, by no means, we should not leave him out. And then Metellus even goes further to say, oh, let us have him, for his silver hairs will purchase us a good opinion, and by men's voices to commend our deeds. It shall be said that his judgment ruled our hands. Our youth and wilderness shall no wit appear, but all buried in his gravity. So they're worried. If you look here, they think that maybe they're too young. And so having somebody a little older in their cause could give it some weight. All right. Now, I believe your first question is about Brutus speaking up against his people. And so we see that kind of play out here when he calls them cowards, when he says that like they are weak if they need to include others. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at that really fast. So he says, your first question here, this one here, is throughout the scene, Brutus seems to resent the sneaky way the others are going about things. He wants to kill Caesar for the good of Rome, believes that this noble cause should be smeared like criminal-like behavior. Remember, he calls them cowards when he wants oaths. But give an example when Brutus spoke out against the behaviors of others. So we see that here on the left-hand side of the screen. He talks about them being cowards. And then the next one, let's keep reading. So they want to include Metellus because they're worried that they'll seem too young and too like full of vigor. So they think if they have somebody older on their side that will help. And so Brutus says, oh, name him not. Let us not break with him, for he will never follow anything that other men begin. And so Brutus is like, no, I don't want this. I'm not interested. Not at all. And so number 2, the question is, who is the only one that doesn't seem to want Cicero to be on the plot? Well, it's Brutus. Brutus isn't interested in including Cicero. He's too old. He doesn't believe that he will follow anything that other people start. Now remember, the group seems to be really interested in getting Brutus on their side. So think about this more in terms of like, why would you want somebody, why would they appease Brutus? Why would the group appease Brutus if he doesn't want Cicero, but they do? You know, what might be their cause behind doing something like that? All right. And then Cassius is like, well, then leave him out. It doesn't matter. And then Cassius is like, yeah, sure, whatever. You know, I just wanted him in our group of like 2 seconds ago, but I'm not interested now. And then Decius is like, shall no other man be touched but Caesar? So he's like, should we take out anybody else while we're at it? And Cassius is like, Decius, well urged. I think it is not meet Mark Antony, so well beloved of Caesar, should outlive Caesar. Cassius wants to kill Antony too. We shall find of him a shrewd contriver, and you know his means, if he improve them, may well stretch so far as to annoy us all, which is to let Antony and Caesar fall together. And so Cassius would like to take out Caesar and Antony as a set. They're very close, and he thinks that by taking out the one, it will alleviate taking out the other. All right. And then Brutus is like, you know, I'm not so sure about that. He says, our course will seem too bloody. Caius Cassius, to cut off the head and then hack at the limbs like wrath and death and envy afterwards, for Antony is but a limb of Caesar. Let's be sacrificers, not butchers. Caius, we will all stand up against the spirit of Caesar, and in the spirit of men there is no blood. Oh, that we should come by Caesar's spirit and not dismember Caesar. But alas, Caesar must bleed for it. And gentle friends, let's kill him boldly, but not wrathfully. So he's like, we should do this because it's the right thing to do, not because we're angry. Let us carve him a dish fit for the gods, not hew him like a carcass fit for hounds. And let our hearts, as subtle masters do, stir up their servants to an act of rage, and after seem to chide them. This shall make our purpose necessary and not envious, which so appearing to the common eyes, we shall be called purgers, not murderers. He's like, we have to think about this one, guys. We can't just run around killing people for no reason. We have to have a good reason as to why we're doing this. And so we need to think about the way that this looks. Optics, my friends. Optics. All right. And so at 5, Brutus persuaded Cassius not to kill Mark Antony. This was a tactical error and Cassius knew it. Why is he willing to make it happen? I think you could reiterate number 3 here if you are able to figure out why in the world might they try to pacify Brutus so much here. All right. But ultimately, Brutus believes that by killing Antony, it will make everything seem too much. And so he's like, I don't think that's the right call. I think we should hold off on killing Antony. He's like, we should just cut the head. He believes Caesar to be the head of Rome, or the head of Mark Antony and he. And he's like, if we get rid of the head, well, then the limbs are useless. And so he's like, I just don't think that we need to kill both of them. All right. So we're going to get ready to head into the next part tomorrow. All right. And we'll come back to this. I'll finish off what Brutus says here, and I'll wait until the clock strikes, and then we'll kind of be done for today. And for Mark Antony, think not of him, for he can do more than Caesar's arm when Caesar's head is off. And Caius says, yet I fear him, for in the engrafted love he bears to Caesar. He's like, I worry that Antony's too loyal. He's like, maybe we should kill him. And Brutus is like, alas, good Cassius, do not think of him. If he loves Caesar, all that he can do is to himself. Make thought and die for Caesar, and that were much he should, for he is given to sports, to wilderness, and much company. And Trebonius digs up with Brutus here. He's like, there's no fear in him, let him not die, for he will live and laugh in this hereafter. He's like, when Caesar dies, it won't be the end of the world. It'll be fine. All right, so we're going to stop here today, and we're going to come back to this tomorrow. Feel free to try to answer through question 5 over here. So you can definitely get through these first 5 with what we've read today. And then when we come back tomorrow, we'll finish up 6 through 10. So we'll finish up the other half of this section. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to text me. You are welcome to do that through Remind, and I am happy to help you. We're also looking into starting a Discord server where you could pop in for help throughout the day or message me that way. But it's very much something that myself and maybe a couple other students are looking at, because we want to make sure that it is used right. All right. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.